Hi folks, and welcome to the next episode of The Franchise Entrepreneur. Today we are going to talk on a recent topical subject in the press this week, which I'm sure you all would have seen somewhere on social media or within the papers or even on TV. Jamie Oliver's restaurant, Jamie's, closing down or going into liquidation. So the things I'd like to touch on are what went wrong, who do I think may be next in the sector to run into problems, and why I have a little sympathy for some of these brands that have got themselves into this kind of position. So what went wrong? Well, it's well documented, the high street problems, lots of difficulties within the high street, high rents, poor site selection will obviously have come into it, low footfall, the market moving on, the sector in itself being a difficult sector, the fast casual dining sector, Brexit pressures, suppliers, cost increases, staff wages, over expansion, overreaching, competition, poor management. There's a whole host of issues that you could probably point to that Jamie's suffered with. I don't think it was only one point. His price range, or his price point, was relatively high for the quality of the food that he was given, which is quite is interesting, because if you look at and listen to Jamie's own explanations, is that he would say that high quality produce, ethical produce, etc., which is all well and good, but the reality was, if you ever had eaten in Jamie's, that portions were relatively small, you never felt that you got a good value for money, and value for money in this sector is hugely important. You're only going to get so far by ethical sourcing of produce and the quality of the ingredients. If you don't give value for money, or the customer doesn't perceive value for money, you're in trouble. And a lot of his units were on the large side as well. So inevitably he was paying higher rent. He also drove some of those rents in his desire to expand at rapid breakneck speed, because he did expand quickly, and that's overreaching yourself. Now, it's always easy to be wise after the event, but there was a perfect storm there. Yeah, so you're Jamie Oliver, you've got X amount of restaurants. What do you think the landlord is going to do? He's going to be rubbing his hands and thinking it's Father Christmas has arrived again. So yes, he's in a difficult position on that, but what he should have done, or whoever was running his company, should have played the game, because it is the game. If the rent is too high, then look for a different location. Don't fall into the trap of having to agree a high rent on a new premises. It's a slightly different situation when you're already within a premises and it's making X amount of money and you're coming up for the renegotiation of it. But when you're going into a new site, you hold all the cards, and it seems to be that he's actually been pushed into higher rents than he should have agreed. You've got to also question the management of some of those stores. I've had very mixed experiences when I've been into any one of those stores. Some of them quite good in terms of its customer service and its management, and seemed to be efficient. In others, it seemed to be pretty poor. But I think its main issue has been over maybe the last 2 or 3 years, where higher management, its directors, have not made the right decisions and not made the right choices. They could, I think, have resurrected Jamie's if they'd acted sooner, and if Jamie himself had probably had his finger on the pulse maybe 3 years ago, not a year and a half ago when it first became evident that it was in trouble, and they closed, I think, 12 stores at that point. I think at that point it was maybe possibly already too late, but they could have changed direction. After all, it's an Italian restaurant. There are a lot of concepts out there that are still doing really well. Francomanca, Pizza Pilgrim. So if it was me, I would have directed him in that kind of direction and said, look, let's get back to the basics. Yes, it's an Italian restaurant, but let's put a lot more emphasis onto our pizzas and make them the very best Neapolitan pizzas that we can do. I think that would have given him a boost. Looked at their pricing and embraced the delivery side of things and operated, say, 2 or 3 dark kitchens from each of their units, because they're big units. They could accommodate it within their kitchens, certainly 2 or 3 other brands. And you can't tell me that Jamie's not capable of creating 2 or 3 different brands to operate out of his kitchens. All of that would have generated additional revenue. So I think he had the opportunity to do it if he had been aware sooner of the problems. The issue is once you get to a point where you owe suppliers £70 million, which is where they were at, that's it. There's nothing you can do. You can't pull back from that. 3 years ago, I don't know what their financial situation was then, but I assume it was better because they were pulling out quite high dividends at that point. So they should have been closer to it, and there's no ifs or buts about it. I think some of the issues that happened with Jamie's were self-inflicted. It isn't just the market. Of course the market is difficult. Landlords have not helped, but he hasn't helped himself. Brexit pressures, absolutely. Of course there are pressures there with suppliers lifting the cost of goods up. Staff wages are considerably higher than they were 5 years ago. So yeah, it's not a pretty sight, but he has certainly made things more difficult for himself by their own poor decision making. So there's Jamie's, and that's my view on what went wrong there. Could he have done something about it? Yes, he could, if he had been closer to it maybe 3 years ago. Once it went past that point, there's a tipping point for any business that you just can't pull back from. So even with some of the changes that I would have suggested, it's down to timing. Leave it too late and you just can't pull it back. So, another interesting side on it, could he have franchised? Should he have franchised at some point? I think with his concept of being franchisable, yes, with some tweaks, he could have franchised. And what he could have done at some point, again, if he'd been closer to the business and maybe looked at the business model and gone, right, okay, this model is not working for us, let's consolidate it, let's do some of these changes that I've explained earlier, let's make it more pizza driven, let's operate some dark kitchens in it, and then let's start selling individual stores off to individual franchisees who would hopefully be operating within those stores. He could have potentially turned it into a successful franchise model. But again, it's easier to be wise after the event. And unfortunately, I think Jamie surrounded himself with the wrong advisors. So let's leave Jamie alone for the moment, and let's talk about who I think is possibly next on the list of, say, restaurants, fast casual restaurants that have the potential to get into difficulty or already in difficulty, some of the reasons why they may be in difficulty. And this isn't just about the fast casual side of the sector. This is also you'll see some QSRs in quick service restaurants. So we'll discuss that. So some of these have probably already been in the paper. In fact, let me start with Eat, which has only just announced, I think in the last couple of days in the paper, that Pret are buying them with a view of converting most of them into purely vegan stores. So I was aware some time ago that Eat were in difficulty. I think they lost somewhere in the region of 17 million last year. They've been in some sort of difficulty probably for the last couple of years, to be honest with you. Owned by a private equity company, so they're now being bought by Pret, as I said, with a view to turn them into a vegan outlets. Why are Pret doing that? Well, I would say for operational reasons. Why are they not doing all their vegan offerings within their existing stores? And if anyone is within the industry, they will understand that to guarantee something as being totally vegan when you have a live kitchen that operate in most of their stores. To keep vegan separate from the rest of the food is quite a difficult operational position to do. So it's easier to have restaurants or outlets that are purely vegan, purely the other, the normal side of the food. So that's part of it, and obviously there is a market for it. There are 600,000 vegans within the country who, this has become a very popular sector of the business. So, it's obviously a viable operation for them, or they believe it's a viable operation for them. I'm not sure that turning all 94 outlets into vegan will be viable. I guess they're going to have to pick and choose which of those stores are capable of, are going to be busy enough and viable enough to sustain a purely vegan offering. It's unclear on whether they're keeping the Eat brand at all, or whether they are looking to convert all of those sites. I'm unsure about that. But there you go. There's Eat. There's another brand that's very similar to Eat called Pod. I think again, you only have to walk around London and other places and see some of their sites. Some of them are big rents. Also, they're not particularly busy. In fact, one of the quieter ones on the high street, which again, is saying something. If you can't make something busy in the heart of London, then you've got problems, because you could almost open up any kind of concept in London and you're going to have some customer base there. So again, looking at them, they look quite old. The concept looks a bit old, tired. So I think it's prime for having a difficult time. Another one that might surprise people, Five Guys. Now, Five Guys again are going on a fairly robust expansion plan. Five Guys, I'm not saying will go bust like Jamie Oliver's, but I do believe that they will find it more difficult, and you will see some of the current sites that they have opened up outside of London where they have picked some really poor sites that I know are not busy and they're paying big rents. This is a typical example of a well-run company that has good success in London. Now, obviously, they're massive in other countries, but I'm talking purely about the UK here, who, like I said, had success in London, have now taken the success of London and gone, we can replicate that in other cities and other locations outside of London. I don't know who advises them about this, because I see it all of the time. London-based concepts, brands, successful in London, overreaching themselves, not understanding the market outside of London and thinking that they can replicate outside of London, and they just don't get it. And landlords will just lap it up because they see these brands coming a mile off, and whoever is doing their negotiating on their rents doesn't do a good enough job. Because what happens with the landlords is they see these guys come in, a big brand, for some reason the agent or whoever it is who's representing this brand thinks that they're getting a good deal from the landlord that's outside of London because they're cheaper. So they're thinking, wow, yeah, look, we're getting a cheaper rent here, significantly cheaper. So it might be 20%, but the reality is that it should be closer to probably 40% cheaper. So they're not getting a good deal. The landlord's rubbing his hands. The reality is that your footfall is going to be so much slower and so much less outside of London than inside. And that's the typical mistake that these brands make. And this is what's happening with Five Guys. They're picking the wrong sites. Not all of them, but I can name a number of those, and I've seen some of them, and they're just dead. They will be closed within the next 12 months. So I'm not saying that Five Guys are going to go bust. What I am saying is that they're going to learn some nasty lessons by coming out of London and going into these sites. They should be looking to consolidate their position in London and just being very, very careful on what their site selection is. Whoever's doing it at the moment is not doing a good enough job. Another brand, Wasabi, again, London-based brand, done really well in London, started to branch out of London and is not doing a good job of it. Big sites, starting to look a bit tired. I think they're going to struggle. I think you're going to find that they start closing a few sites, and I'll be very surprised if they're not up for sale very, very soon. Subway, well, Subway's on every street, isn't it? Quick service restaurant. It has probably been quietly closing and consolidating its stores now for probably 2 years. It hasn't had a lot of press. There has been press about what they've been doing in the States, where they have closed a considerable amount of stores, but not so much about what's been going on in the UK. Now, I'm quite close to this because we've got a number of franchisees that have got investments in Subway, and I know quite a lot of people within Subway as well. So I know that they are having a particularly difficult time and struggling. So it's tired. The market's moved on. They're selling sandwiches at the end of the day. Another concept, Vino, I believe already had some financial difficulties at the beginning of the year. I don't think those have gone away. I would be very surprised if they survive beyond the next 6 to 12 months, unfortunately. And then there's some of the big boys. You have Las Iguanas. Now, I personally think it's not a great concept, or it's not being delivered great. The sites that I have seen have been pretty quiet, and they are big units, which are pretty expensive. I have been to a couple that have been really busy, but the quality of what they do is pretty basic, and I don't think it's a brand that is going places. I know they're looking to franchise overseas, but I think it's one that's going to hit the buffers unless it changes some direction. It could be one that again just consolidates its position and just closes down some of the ones that are not working for it. We should, I guess we'll see with that one, but it's one that I think keep your eye on. I think you may see some closures there. Frankie and Benny's, I think, is well publicised that's been in difficulty for some time. It's part of, I believe, the restaurant group, has already closed down a number of them, but it simply is just out of step with the market. But again, restaurant group as a whole is out of step with the market in terms of a lot of its brands, but it has some very strong brands in there that keep it going. So it has a very strong concession side of the business that is doing really well. It's obviously bought Wagamama's, which again I think is a bit of smoke and mirrors here. I think Wagamama's was almost a vanity buy, and to kind of prop up some of their existing business. I think you'll see restaurant groups selling off some of their brands. I wouldn't be surprised if Frankie and Benny is one of them, and then consolidating around the new baby, which is Wagamama's, and the concession business, which are highly profitable. Prezzo, again, Prezzo is very similar to Jamie's, in its kind of feel and its vibe, and I think the market's moved on, and Prezzo's already closed down a number of stores, but I can see that brand almost disappearing because I just don't see the relevance of it in the market at the moment. There are obviously other ones that have already been through some hard times. Carluccio's obviously had a difficult period. It's had some closures. It seems to have had a little bit of more, bit of a revamp in it. But I still, again, I don't think you've seen the last of this one. I think there will still be some refining of that concept. Gino's is another one. Again, I mentioned Gino's in a post not so long ago, a few days ago in fact, that I thought it might be one to watch. I get very mixed reports on Gino's. Some of them are very, very busy, and others are fairly poor. I think that's one that has really got on the cusp. I think one step in the wrong direction could find itself in difficulty if they go for a big expansion project. I don't know what their expansion plans are, but I think if they keep to where they are at the moment, and I think most people that are in this sector, the name of the game at the moment is about consolidating and improving on what you've got and sweating your existing assets. Expansion in the market that you've got at the moment in this casual dining sector is a mistake. So that's where I think we're at. Those are some of the ones what I think, some of the brands that I think could potentially find themselves in difficulty. I'm sure there are others. There are others that I think are probably on the cusp. I think Coat is potentially another one. Someone said to me Nando's could maybe overextend themselves. Maybe people will get bored of the concept. You know, it's chicken after all. I've not heard anything about Nando's. Most Nando's that I go past are pretty busy, but they're getting old now. You know, it's an old brand, and what do you do to revamp an old brand that is purely based around selling chicken? So who knows? You know, maybe it could find itself in a difficult position in a couple of years, but I don't think it's one of the ones at the moment that I would highlight as potentially getting itself into trouble. The Ivy, again, mixed reports on the Ivy. I think that the problem with the Ivy that it could potentially come up against is that it's expanding fairly rapidly, and as I said, I think that's bad advice. I think they should consolidate around where they are at the moment. Make sure that what they're offering is absolutely in tune with the market, and improving where they can, and then going again maybe in a year or two. We come along to the next subject, and that's why I have no sympathy for some of these brands that have got themselves into this position. Now, let me explain that. It may seem controversial, it may seem a little bit harsh. After all, this is people's jobs that we're talking about. Now, the good news is that within hospitality, there's a real shortage of good staff. So Jamie Oliver's staff and probably one or two that I've mentioned that go by the way by, those staff will be hoovered up fairly rapidly because of those shortages. Suppliers, I feel sorry for, because there will be some suppliers that will be put in real difficulty because of these companies that are going bust. Jamie Oliver's £70 million, that's an awful lot, isn't it? Now, how much of that was with banks and finance companies? I would probably suggest the bulk of that. There will also probably within that 70 million will probably be in what's owed to himself. So in terms of what's actually owed to suppliers, it will probably be considerably less than that, but nonetheless there will be suppliers that aren't getting paid. Landlords will also be included within that, I suspect. I don't have a lot of sympathy for the landlords, I'll be honest with you. I think they've been milking it for many a year, and they have been a big part of the problem. Like I said, they've seen the brands like Jamie come along and they've rubbed their hands and thought this is Christmas all over again, and they've taken advantage of it. Well, what goes around comes around, so absolutely don't feel sorry for the landlords one little bit. And yes, I'm not going to feel sorry for some of these brands. I mean, obviously Jamie Oliver has other business interests. He's reportedly worth 170 odd million pounds. He's just bought a £6 million mansion. Don't shed any tears there. He's going to be fine. And some of these brands are just getting what they deserve. A lot of them are owned by private equity companies, and these private equity companies have just milked it for what they can get from it for a number of years. They've made really bad decisions. They've made the market considerably worse by their actions. Let me give you an example. Most of these brands have helped contribute to increasing rents. With their absurd expansion at any cost attitude, they have contributed to their own demise. But they've driven rents up because landlords know they have a safe haven. When the retail was retreating, and still is retreating from the high street, there was a gap there, and restaurants moved into that gap, and landlords lapped it up. it became a safe haven for landlords because food and beverage was considered a safe environment for them. And when you've got big brands coming in from outside, from London to the outside, to the provincial cities, you've got landlords that are rubbing their hands because they know that these guys are used to paying big rents. So all of a sudden the rents are getting pushed up. Surveyors are rubbing their hands because they're now getting bigger commissions. It was never sustainable, but it was private equity money, awash with money, go for expansion at any cost. A desire to expand at breakneck speed, an oversimplified business strategy that was assumed that because it worked in London, it was going to work elsewhere. My advice for anyone that's got a London brand, consider London as almost a different country. You cannot rely on the same strategy to work outside in the provincial cities and towns that worked in London. They just simply don't have the footfall there. And also, some of the tastes are slightly different. The local market expectation is different. So a lot of these brands have created their own demise, but what they've also left behind is a market that has now got higher rents, higher expectations and they've made it more difficult for the independents. So as an independent operator myself, I have little sympathy for these bigger brands because they've made life more difficult for myself and other localised individual independent brands who do understand the local market better, but have unfortunately now had it made more difficult for them because the landlord's expectations on rents are so much higher. Some of these brands that have come out of London just have not done their homework on the local market. As I've said, localised businesses are becoming more popular. People have been, I guess, almost gone full circle. It was a big move away from independent restaurants and boutique shops and retail a number of years ago to go to branded shops and branded restaurants. Now it's gone almost full circle where people are looking for some individuality, for them to be local, and now the brands are suffering for that. But they should have seen this coming. With all this money that they've had from private equity, they should spend a little bit more on their homework and doing their homework and their research before they go on breakneck expansion plans. So absolutely, I've got no sympathy for most of these brands. One thing that I would say is that some of these brands should maybe consider looking at a franchise model, which would actually help them localize some of their offerings. And when I say that, basically trying to run a 50-store restaurant from London or from any city means you're unlikely to know all the ins and outs of the local market. If you franchise it out to individuals who are working within those stores, they will more likely build up more localised clientele and will understand the local market better. But that doesn't kind of fit in particularly well with the private equity business strategy. So probably will never happen. But if I had one of those bigger brands, I would certainly be looking at converting some of those stores into franchise stores and using the local knowledge of owner-operators to help turn those stores around if they were in difficulty before it becomes too late. So before you get into a situation like Jamie's where it just simply was too late, they should be looking at that kind of model now, because I've absolutely no doubt that some of those stores and some of those brands that I've mentioned are already in difficulty. So thank you again for joining the Franchise Entrepreneur podcast, and please do leave a review if you found this insightful or useful, or even if you didn't enjoy it or don't like it. I still would like your comments and reviews, and hopefully I'll do better next time for you.